Our universities have deteriorated terribly. It's part of the reason for pessimism over the West. The question that I ask to find out if I'm speaking to a fool, even intelligent and kind, you can be intelligent, kind, and foolish, just for the record, is I ask them if they believe people are basically good. If they do, and some of you might, and I don't mean to offend you, in that regard, you are a fool. And why people choose to believe something so patently absurd is beyond me. What happened when Judeo-Christian religion died, specifically Christianity in Europe? You got Nazism and communism. People don't stop believing in religions when God-based religion dies. They just develop other religions. We have more religions in the United States that are secular than we have that are religious. Feminism, environmentalism, egalitarianism, humanism, I mean, it's just, you know, the isms are there. Because people, as Chesterton said, when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. Good needs to be studied and analyzed, not evil. For every book on evil, or let's put it this way, for every 1,000 books studying human evil, there might be one, maybe one, I doubt it. I don't think the ratio is even 1 to 1,000, probably 1 to 50,000 books on why people are good. I have read every book I know of on rescuers of Jews in the Holocaust. I am sure there are under 20. There are thousands of books about Nazi evil. And there might be 20 books on analyzing the people who saved Jews. That to me is a much bigger riddle. I understand why people torture, murder, go with the herd. Why do people stand up to the herd is an infinitely more important question, it would strike me. So Western civilization had evils like every other civilization, every other, but it had unique good. Human rights, Western concept, universal human rights. Western, uniquely Western. These are not just Western, they're uniquely. Human equality, all people are equal, Western. Democracy, Western. Abolition of slavery, Western. The greatest music, the greatest art, the greatest architecture, Western. Now people will say, oh please, that is so dismissive of other music, art, and architecture. But it isn't. It's a statement that those people believe. Ask Japanese, what's the greatest music ever written? They'll say Bach. I'm very involved in classical music, so that's the art that I will use. I conduct orchestras in Southern California. This is a very serious pursuit of mine in my life. So I will tell you the greatest edition of the Bach cantatas, the greatest, it is generally universally acknowledged, was done by a man named Suzuki, and he just finished his 300th CD just the last year. Incidentally, I have a theory that there were two major sea changes in American life that produced a sort of moral and intellectual deterioration or an enfeeblement of the American mind. And they both took place after World War II. One is television, which did profoundly enfeeble American culture. If there were no television, we would be much better off. And people say, well, isn't there anything good on TV? It's like when people will call my show and say, you know, Dennis, you really attack the left a lot. Didn't the left do anything good? And I honestly answer them, there is nothing in history that has not done any good. It doesn't exist. The question is meaningless. It's like asking, well, you know, this guy, it's true, he raped 3 girls and 2 boys, murdered 4 of the 5, but there's a good side to everybody. Well, it doesn't mean anything. We all have moral bank accounts, and if they're deeply in the red, they're deeply in the red. The moral bank account of television is bankruptcy. And there was one other development, widespread college attendance. It has enfeebled the American mind just as much, but much more dangerously, because people who watch TV don't assume they are brilliant. But people who get a PhD do think they're brilliant, and they're not. And so mature people don't ask, well, or say, look at all the evil, they say, why is there any good? Good is the outlier, not evil. Slavery was universal. Child sacrifice was universal. Human sacrifice generally was universal. Poverty was universal. So the only mature question is, why did any place abolish human sacrifice? Why did any place abolish slavery? Why did any place create wealth? That's what you should ask, but nobody asks that. It is a non-college asked question. Evil is universal, so let's discount it. The question is, why is there good, not why is there evil is the norm. What's the secular case against public nudity? It's not a riddle. There is none. I assume all of you oppose public nudity. I mean, in the streets. I don't care. I'm not talking about a private beach, right? You don't have a single secular argument. San Francisco had this debate. City Council actually debated whether or not to drop bans on public nudity. This happened 2 years ago. And they lost. The dropping of the bans lost by one vote. I think it was 8-7. San Francisco City Council. So in other words, within a year or two, they will drop the ban and public nudity will be allowed in San Francisco. Do you know what the argument was? Because I was shocked. 8 people voted to keep laws against public nudity in San Francisco, the quintessentially secular place. And the argument they gave was, it isn't sanitary. That's it. That was the argument. It's not sanitary. So of course there's a response. Naked people will have to carry a towel, and when they sit on a park bench, they will have to sit on the towel. And I think that ends the problem of the sanitary argument. The only argument against public nudity is that human beings are created in God's image and have sanctity. Animals are naked, humans are clothed. The first thing God does in Genesis, the first thing God does for humanity after humanity leaves the Garden of Eden, or begins to leave by eating of the tree of knowledge, is make them clothing. But it's a book nobody reads anymore. Nobody reads the Bible. In fact, I have an ongoing policy on my show. When someone calls and says something particularly stupid, I then say, I'm just curious, what graduate school did you attend? And then they will say, people fall in, it's beautiful. I feel like a straight man, it works out beautifully. And then they say, well, how do you know I went to graduate school? And I said, well, it's not meant to insult you, because I never insult callers or guests. But you had to go to graduate school to say something that stupid. And I mean that, by the way. You have to have gone to college to believe men and women are basically the same. My grandmother, who didn't graduate elementary school, understood men and women better than most PhDs in women's studies. I mean that literally. I do not mean that hyperbolically. They don't understand anything. If you get a PhD in the liberal arts, I assume you're foolish. There are exceptions. Of course there are. I'm not foolish. But they are exceptions. And it's like getting a PhD in howdy doody. All right? But nobody who gets a PhD in howdy doody thinks they're brilliant. But if you get one from college or from university, you do think that. Because I remember, I'll never forget, when I was my late teens, early 20s, so I guess I was already at college, I was having a meal at my parents' house, and there was another couple there with their child, something to that effect. Anyway, the child was yelling at the parents, and I don't mean disrespectfully, but was, so to speak, yelling at the parents. Look, Dad, you just don't understand. You didn't go to college. The father was entirely right about what he was saying, but he was intimidated because his son went to college. And so his son, who had been already indoctrinated into the very opposite values of his father, never have so many people paid so much money to have their children become alienated from their values. This has never occurred in the history of mankind until modern American society. I would say Western European, but the Western Europeans are not traditional so they don't feel that their kids are being alienated from their values. They're just being reinforced. I'll never forget when I was in Tokyo in my 20s, I went to hear Beethoven's Ninth Tokyo Symphony Orchestra. And I was there, I was traveling alone, which is the way I traveled prior to getting married. It's a great way to travel. You really are forced to interact with people. Anyway, I went to the guy, and obviously I don't speak Japanese. He spoke a little English. Said, any tickets? He said, how many? I said, one. And he looks at me, we have one, you are very lucky. And I'll never forget that, how lucky I was to get the last seat for Beethoven's Ninth. And the people went crazy. They're crazy about Beethoven. None of them argue that Japanese classical music is as good as Western classical music. It's no insult. I mean, would I argue Jewish music is as good as Western music? I mean, I'd have to be deaf to make such an argument. But you can't say this at any university. There is no better. There is no better. So I don't care, again, if you're atheist, but the founders knew. Let me just read to you one perfect example. John Adams, okay? John Adams. Because we have no government armed with power, capable of contending with human passions, unbridled by morality and religion. By the way, see, they understood people are not basically good. That's the point. Human passions unbridled. They were afraid of human passions. Something's got to control human passions. Either the government will, or what will? Answer, religion. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. A secular conservative who does not understand that differs with the founders, every single one of whom spoke of the critical nature of God and religion and Bible. Not all were Orthodox Christians, that is true. Not all believed in the Trinity. All believed, however, in this God. Even Jefferson and Franklin designed, or had someone design the Great Seal of the United States. You know what it was? The Jews leaving Egypt. Two guys who were considered quote-unquote deists. Incidentally, reading Franklin's autobiography, I realized, and I remember when I read this to my wife, Franklin and I have identical theologies. Identical. And to call him a deist is an absurdity. He believed that God judges every human being. That's not a deist. A deist is God created the world and then checked out. Not one of the founders believed that. Virtually everything good in the human species has come from Western civilization. Incidentally, just for the record, I am well aware of a lot of evil that has taken place in Western civilization. I wrote a book, which is now in its third edition with Simon & Schuster, coming out its third edition, I think next week or last week, don't recall. Why the Jews, the reason for anti-Semitism. I know how Jews have been treated in Western civilization. I wrote a book on it, as it happens. So I am not oblivious to the amount of evil that has taken place in the West. However, evil is ubiquitous. Evil is universal. I am pessimistic. I am also the happiest pessimist you will ever meet. So how is it possible to be happy and pessimistic? Now, you may or may not know, I've devoted a great deal of time to the subject of happiness. I wrote a book that has sold very well, Happiness is a Serious Problem. It's touched a lot of lives, apparently, and my happiness hour on my radio show, which I have never canceled. It's the second hour on Friday. I broadcast my happiness hour the week of 9/11. That was a Tuesday, if I recall correctly, and on Friday I still did my happiness hour, and I made the point. The whole point of a happiness hour is how can you be happy in light of how much suffering there is. To have canceled the happiness hour would have given in. Then I have nothing to say. The whole point, that's why I titled my book, Happiness is a Serious Problem. HarperCollins hated the title. They said it was a downer. And I'll never forget my discussion with them. I said, I just want to know, is it true? Yeah, of course it's a serious problem. Thank you. That's the title. And that remained the title, but I had to fight for it because it was a downer. But it's true. Anyway, It's true because the world is in terrible shape. It's always been in terrible shape, except there was reason for optimism. And now there isn't much reason for optimism because the good guys are losing. We're losing the most important country for goodness ever invented, the United States of America. And Western Europe is essentially lost, but it's been lost essentially since World War I. It gave up on itself after World War I. America gave up on itself, I guess, after college and the Vietnam War. And we're just trailing Europe by about a generation. But most intellectuals think Western Europe is a great place.